Hi everyone, this is a short screencast for CIMA E2 covering Mixed Bank 2 of the BPP Practice and Exam Kit. And in this first question, we're asked for characteristics not associated with an NGO. And what is an NGO? Well, really, a good example would be Oxfam, perhaps. And what do they do? Well, really, they're there to ease suffering and to help the poor, help the disadvantaged. So if you scan down the answers here, you'll see that it's highly likely that making profits is really not part of their gambit. Okay, and you often find with these MCQ questions, you look at the other examples, and this one's particularly helpful. Certainly these first two, it's easy to associate these with an NGO, humanitarian causes and social causes. Perhaps independence is also one as well. Okay, so certainly making profits wouldn't be associated with an entity such as Oxfam, an NGO. So the answer is C in that case. 15.2, we're looking at sort of expanding the level of economic activity. So really sort of increasing economic activity. And how would we do that? Well, simple way to do it, as I've said here, is to increase public expenditure. What that's going to do if the government are spending more is that it's going to increase demand, and that must therefore increase activity. If we've got people wanting to buy more, wanting more goods, that's more activity. And really these other ones, an increase in taxation and obviously interest rates, those ones are probably fairly easy to see that they'll have the reverse effect. If we're raising taxes, people are going to have less money in their pocket. That's going to reduce activity. If we increase interest rates, people are going to find it more difficult to borrow, and also their interest charges are going to be higher. Therefore, they're going to spend less. That's going to reduce activity. And in terms of personal savings, an increase in personal savings, that's really not going to help. It'll mean that people are saving more, spending less. That's not an increase in economic activity. So the answer in this case was D, an increase in public expenditure. That's going to generate demand and therefore increase economic activity. 15.3 here, we're asked about internal control systems. And really, I guess this is in the area of sort of corporate governance and control of the finance function. Really what we should understand, what is internal control? Well, it's very simply a check, some sort of check to enable the business to run more efficiently, okay? And what they talk about here is this issue of fraud. So we're really asked to consider what will we do first. And of these ones here, certainly the areas of risk are absolutely key. In other words, you really have to establish where the opportunity is for fraud first. Fraud will not come without opportunity. So you need to know your risk areas, and you need to build your internal control system really around the highest risk areas. So in this case, the answer is B. These other ones, perhaps helpful, but certainly the first area. Remember what they said here, what is considered first? So do read the question carefully, okay? In this case, the answer is B, areas of potential risk. That's most important. Okay, this one, 15.4, fairly straightforward. We should be familiar with the virtual team, just the idea of a group of people working remotely. How are they going to do that? Well, it's really got to be facilitated through IT, IT and IS, information systems. These ones, perhaps one or two of them might be relevant, but normally the result, virtual teams, the result of certainly developments in IT. You wouldn't have seen virtual teams in existence, 20, 30 years ago. That's for sure. IT has helped to facilitate that. So the answer is B in that case. Next one here, 15.5, a little bit of learning for us to do here, really the difference between passive and active resistance. Passive resignation and active resignation, really not relevant to change. And we're really asked here to see or establish, what are the possible responses to change. So we've got to be familiar with these phrases. Passive, really associated with a sort of working to rule. We're not sort of doing anything active. We're sort of just refusing to do anything really, okay? So I think passive resistance is the answer here. Active resistance, it may well be people will have gone for that, given that we're talking about fairly strong words like regressive and non-learning behavior. But active resistance means just that, something serious. In other words, perhaps even sabotage or deliberately going slow. So try and get a fix on the difference between these two. We're looking at something pretty serious here. Sabotage would be a pretty serious thing to do within an organization. Whereas up here, in terms of passive, we just sort of sitting tight, not really too bothered about the change, not overly interested. Okay, so A is the answer for 15.5. This one here, 15.6, a little bit of a scenario for us, and it refers to Porter's value chain as we see in the requirement. Let's remember that PVC is all about efficiency and making the organization more efficient. How do we do that? Well, sort of eliminate sort of non-value adding activities and really overall trying to get the business a little bit tighter. Okay, now in terms of the scenario here, if we read down it, we see that Steve is involved in admin and also sort of legal and compliance. Sheila is specifically dealing with after sales, and that should be a hint really for us as to where we need to place our answer. Sunday, or Sunny as referred to below, is involved with price and quality inventory, but also particularly the idea of suppliers of plant and machinery. So it looks like Sunny or Sunday is involved in buying in some way. And then Sam is involved in IT or information technology. That should be fairly easy to spot as sort of being a secondary or support activity. So really what we're required to do is to pick out primary, and really for primary it has to be Sheila at the end really of that little sort of chain of 5 items under the primary heading. She's certainly involved in after sales, which is a primary activity. The others, as I've just listed here, are all secondary or support activities. Okay, so the answer B in that case. Moving on to 15.7, just bear with me 1 second. What we've got here is a reference to TQM, Total Quality Management. Popular little area for MCQs, I would say, because there's lots of little models in there and probably new phrases for students to learn. And just remember that TQM and Total Quality Management, a lot of it stems from sort of Japanese manufacturing and indeed Japanese theorists, and we're really looking at the difference between sort of quality control, that old style view of quality, really produce and then inspect, towards sort of new style or contemporary enlightened thinking, which would be quality assurance, this idea that we sort of build quality in, we constantly check it, we use quality circles, etc. And this 5S model, although I think the original words are Japanese, we should try and remember just that structurized, systemized, sanitized, etc. That is the 5S model. So some rote learning required there. These other ones are just distractors for us. So C is the answer in this case. Okay. Moving on to 15.8, sort of old favorite here with the examiner, this idea of a marketing orientation. And we should really remember that this marketing orientation is sort of the preferred route of within our E1 syllabus. They're looking for us to sort of, to suggest that really the only way forward is a marketing orientation whereby we're thinking about the customer. And what does the customer want? Well, the customer has a number of needs. We've got to think about those. That's what they want. You've got to give them what they want. So the answer here in this case is certainly a focus on what the customer needs. In terms of other orientations, which are generally sort of frowned upon, as it were, obviously we've got a sales orientation where the entity is just purely interested in making sales. Over and above that, we've got a product orientation where we're focusing on just building a product, making a product, and making the features unique, and then getting it out into the market and really hoping that it sells itself. I guess Apple would be a good example of that. Or perhaps the last one, a production orientation, where we're simply looking to produce as many units as possible, keep our fixed costs down, achieve economies of scale, and really hopefully price perhaps at a low level to attract sales. But certainly a marketing orientation is our preferred one, and it's all about thinking customer, thinking about what the customer wants. Now 15.9 here, we're talking about internet advertising, and we're asked to suggest what is what would be unhelpful. Think about your own personal experience. The one I've gone for here, which is the correct answer, is these pop-up advertisements, and you will have seen those yourself. They can be a little bit annoying, a little bit irritating. They've asked us for an unhelpful feature. We've just really got to be able to distinguish between these ones. You might well think that one or two of them are unhelpful. Perhaps games and entertainment, you may not be interested, but this is probably the least helpful out of the lot. A pop-up advertisement, an advertisement that just pops up when you don't want it and you're trying to concentrate perhaps on buying the product or doing something else. Okay, so certainly D is the answer there. Moving on from there, we've got this idea of this contract. In other words, the contract between an organization and an individual, or an employer and an employee. Really what the employer wants is for the employee to do the work, yes, and to do the work that they've been asked to do. This should read employee rather than employment. And really what an employee wants, what do they want? Well, they want to get paid for the work. So really what we're saying in terms of unwritten expectations is we're saying that the employer expects something and the employee expects something. Detailed here, that's what's called the psychological contract, the unwritten contract. And really, I guess what we're saying is you sort of break that contract, you're going to have an issue within the organization or an issue in the relationship. It's going to break down. Okay, so hopefully that's been helpful, and good luck with your studies. Many thanks.